Well, hello and welcome to our Luke Bible class today. We're going to be studying from Luke chapter 15, the entire chapter, 32 verses. So if you want to be turning there in the New Testament and following along with us in our study, that would be great. Now, many of you are aware of the fact that I've done something a little bit different with this class than I've done previously, and that is I posted some questions, a study sheet, if you will, both in the Facebook group for this class, but then I also posted it on the church's Facebook page as well. I did that yesterday, so you'd have a chance to see those questions and read through our text for study today and get your mind kind of going in the direction of what we're going to do in this study. And so the way I want to approach our study today is for us to go back through the questions that I posted, and we'll answer those, and we'll just see how this goes. And if it seems to go okay, then maybe for upcoming classes, I can post some questions, study sheet for you to look over prior to the video for the class being posted. So I'll try to do those study sheets, those study questions, at least a day before. So for the next class, I'll try to get those posted on Tuesday of this coming week. And so those will be ready and available for you to look over ahead of time before then the class will post for Wednesday night. Now, speaking of Wednesday night, this past Wednesday I had a little trouble getting the video posted. It was late, and I apologize for that. User error. I don't know what else to say. I wish there was somebody or something I could blame for it, but I'll just have to take the fault for that and just apologize and ask your forgiveness, and hopefully I can have those things posted in a more timely fashion moving forward. So how I want us to proceed today. Here in Luke chapter 15, we have three parables from Jesus, and then all of these parables are tied together. They're connected together. And I want us to just look at each of the parables briefly, particularly the first two of them, just so we'll have in our minds what Jesus is teaching and what he has said. And then we're going to go back and we're going to use the questions that I posted on the Facebook group. And answering those questions will serve then as kind of our structure for our study and our class today. So, three parables. The first of these parables we know as the parable of the lost sheep. And Jesus says, "What man of you?" So this could be anybody. So a man has 100 sheep. One of those sheep is lost. And so he leaves the 99 in the open country, and he goes after the one that's lost. And when he finds it, he lays it on his shoulders rejoicing. He's going to bring it back. And he comes home and he calls together friends and neighbors, and he says to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." And then he adds this statement, "Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." Second parable, the parable of the lost coin. And so a woman has 10 silver coins, but she loses one of them. And so she will light a lamp, she'll sweep the house, and she'll seek diligently until she finds that coin. And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost," and then adds again this statement, "Just so, I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents." And now finally, the third parable. And it is much longer than the previous two, and it is one of the parables with which we are most familiar. The parable, we know it as the parable of the prodigal son. And so let's go through this familiar account. So a man has two sons, And the younger of the two sons says, Father, to his father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And so he divided the property between his two boys. Not many days after that, the younger son gathered all that he had, took his journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. He'd spent everything, and there was a severe famine in that country, and he began to be in need. And he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here and with hunger? I'll rise and go to my father, and I'll say, Father, I've sinned against you. I sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And so he arose and he came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And he said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now, his older brother was in the field. And when he came and he drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked him what these things meant. And he said, your brother has come, and your father killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. Excuse me. And his father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I may celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and to be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. So 3 parables. And all of them tie together. I want us to go to these questions. I hope you've had a chance to look at those. But if not, that's okay. The first question is, Jesus taught these parables in response to what attitude or way of thinking? You see, verses 1 and 2 set the stage for these 3 parables. There we read that tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to Jesus. Tax collectors and sinners were attracted to Jesus. They were coming to him. We've talked about what is meant when Luke or other writers of the New Testament make reference to tax collectors and sinners. These are people who are recognized as living unrighteous lives. They are people who have been ostracized. They've been pushed out to the fringes of culture and society. They're looked down upon. They're despised. People didn't want to have anything to do with them. Those who are called sinners, and that, again, we've said this before, but it's not a sinner in the sense of all sin and come short of the glory of God, but these were people who were living in open disregard to the law of Moses. They were doing wrong. They knew they were doing wrong, and everybody around them knew they were doing wrong, and yet they persisted in it. They were sinners. Tax collectors were ones who were considered to be traitors to the nation of Israel. Because tax collectors worked for the Romans. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but these guys were given the responsibility of collecting the necessary taxes to be given over to Rome, and so their Jewish brethren looked upon them as, the worst sort of person that they could be. And again, they too were ostracized. They were pushed away. They were looked down upon and spoken ill of. And yet it is these very kind of people who were drawing near to Jesus. That's a fascinating thing to consider. What was it about Jesus that was attractive to them? What was it about Jesus and his demeanor and his way of interacting with them that did not drive them away? They felt that they could come to Jesus, and they did. Now, as a result of that, this goes on to say that the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled. They grumbled because tax collectors and sinners were drawing near to Jesus, and this is what they said about Jesus. This man receives sinners and eats with them. And so, contrasted to tax collectors and sinners, you have Pharisees and scribes. These were, of course, obviously, the religious elite. They were the ones who were looked upon with respect and admiration. They were viewed as the ones who were doing it right as far as the practice of faith and their relationship with God and all of those kinds of things. And yet they grumbled at how Jesus interacted with these tax collectors and sinners. He receives them and he eats with them. That was their accusation. And it was accurate. Jesus did do that. He did interact with these people. And so these Pharisees and scribes were critical of Jesus for having the approach that he had toward these obviously sinful people, rejected people, ostracized people. But Jesus was out there with them, and they felt welcomed by him. And so it is based upon that Jesus tells these parables. So the question was, Jesus taught these parables in response to what attitude or way of thinking? It was an attitude or way of thinking that looked upon people, sinful people, in a very dismissive way. Well, we don't have anything to do with them. We don't want to associate with them. We certainly don't want to interact with them at all. They were looked down upon. They were judged and they were condemned. And it was that very attitude that Jesus saw that prompted him to tell 3 parables. Now, the next question is, in each of the parables, something was lost. First of all, what was it that was lost? Well, it was a sheep, a coin, and a boy. Now, how did those things become lost? I think that's an interesting question to ask and line of thought to follow. A sheep is known for its being oblivious. It just doesn't pay attention. It's negligent of itself and its surroundings, and it will just wander off and put itself in danger, not deliberately, but just, due to its own way of acting. And so it becomes lost, not really through any fault of its own, although, it is a fault of its own, but that's how it becomes lost, okay? Now, how does the coin become lost? Well, it becomes lost because of the lack of care on the part of the one who possessed or owned the coin. She was negligent. It's a woman who has these 10 silver coins, and so she was negligent of her possessions. And so sometimes a person can become lost through no fault of their own, but because of the negligence of other people. That doesn't change their responsibility in a given situation, but this coin is lost for a different reason than the sheep was lost, or, as we see, thirdly, the boy was lost. And this boy was lost due to his own deliberate rebellion and rejection of his father. That's how he became lost. He became lost because of his attitude and the choices he made and the actions that he pursued as a result of those choices. So the point here is that people can wind up in a state of being lost for different reasons. Not everyone becomes lost for the same reason, but the end result is the same. They are lost. So 3 things lost, 3 different reasons as why they are lost. But all three are also found. Now, how are they found? Well, let's go back to the lost sheep. That lost sheep is found because the owner of that sheep made a choice. He made a priority of that one that was lost and determined to pursue it, knowing that in order to pursue that sheep to find it, it would have to leave the 99. There was a choice of priority made here by this owner of these sheep. And that's the only way that it was found. Now, in regard to the woman and her lost coin, she found that coin because she recognized that she had lost that coin, and she made very careful and deliberate and thorough search in order to find it. And so that's why the coin was found. Now, why was the lost boy found? Different circumstance altogether, isn't it? The lost boy was found because he hit rock bottom. He came to a realization of his own failure and mistake and sin. He confesses to that sin. And he made the choice to leave, and he had to make the choice to come back, and he was willing to do so, and the Father was willing to receive him. And so there was the exercise of will on the part of that boy, and the willingness of the Father to be gracious and compassionate to his son, that in this instance the lost was then found. Now, another question that we tagged on the end of that. So what was the response? Okay, they were lost and found, and the response is, in every case, rejoicing. There is rejoicing that the lost has been found. And I think it's also worthy of note that in those first two parables, the lost sheep and the lost coin, that the owner in each case said to friends and neighbors, rejoice with me. There was an invitation to rejoice in the fact that the lost had been found. Now, in the third parable, the prodigal son, there was a celebration at the return of that boy. And though it wasn't stated, I think it is implicitly there that there's the desire for the father for there to be rejoicing. He's inviting others to rejoice with him that his son has been found. Now, so we have the lost and found, and these three parables are being given in response to this attitude that is very dismissive and judgmental and condemning of the lost, sinners and tax collectors, and critical of Jesus for his willingness to associate with them. Now, let's move on to this third. We want to spend a little more time with the third parable, the prodigal son. And the reason for that is that Jesus obviously dives a little deeper here. And he kind of expands the field of thought with this particular parable. So we have this man who has two sons, the younger of which asks for his inheritance, and the father gives it to him. Now, the third question that we have on our study sheet, what were the circumstances surrounding the younger son's leaving? His attitudes, his demands, and the father's response. Well, obviously this boy was acting very selfishly. He was pursuing a life that was very self-indulgent, and he wanted to get from his father what typically, rightfully, would have been considered to be his, but then to use that for his own selfish purposes. Now, there are some social and cultural nuances here that are not readily apparent to us as modern day readers of this parable. This boy could not have acted any more selfishly. He could not have been any more disrespectful and hateful toward his father than he was in demanding to be given his inheritance. Inheritance that was given was typically done at the time of death or shortly prior to death. And so in a sense, this boy is saying, you know, you're dead to me. I just want my goods so I can go do what I want. And so his selfishness extended to the point of being in your face towards his father. The level of disrespect, the level of shame that he brought on this family was so high. And so here is this boy who is acting this way, and it is important for us to know how the father responds to this boy. He gives him what he asked for. He gives him his inheritance. He allows him to act upon the choices that he has made and to do the things that he wants to do. Could the father have stopped him? I guess probably so. Probably so. But he allowed this boy to make these choices. He allowed this boy to take the actions that he took, even though this father knew that it was all wrong. It was just absolutely wrong. On so many levels, it was wrong. But he would not force him to not do the wrong thing. Unfortunately, sometimes we can be told multiple times that something is wrong or it's a mistake and you shouldn't do that. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't learn until we've experienced it. There came a time when this boy realized that, man, he had made a huge, huge mistake, but his father let him make the mistake. And that says something to we're going to talk about that a little bit. About that says something to us about God, and we're going to come back to that here at the end of our study. So those were the circumstances surrounding the boy's leaving, and he goes off to a far country. He wants separation from his family, from his father. He doesn't want prying eyes. He doesn't want to be around people who know him. He doesn't want to be in that cultural setting where there were expectations of him. He just wanted to get out, get away, and all of the restraints to be removed from him. And that's what he accomplished. And so he goes and he spends everything he has in reckless living. I'm going to do what I want. I think one of the reasons why this parable resonates so strongly with people throughout generations is human nature, and we can all relate to that. We probably can all relate to that youthful desire to be able to make our own decisions, to do what I want to do, and not having anybody to tell me that I can't do it. And well, here this boy put himself in exactly that situation, and he did. He lived at, well, his brother's accusation was that he devoured, to the father, he said, he devoured your property with prostitutes. Wow. He was living it up. He was living it up. At least he thought he was. But soon all of his resources were gone. And soon, where they were living, a lot of people were in bad shape because there was a severe famine in the land. And so all of a sudden, he couldn't take care of himself, and there was no one there who would take care of him, and so he had to do whatever he could, and that ended up being working for a man in that country, feeding his pigs. And this boy was so hungry that it was tempting to him to eat the swine's food. But he came to himself. Okay, our next question then is, what were the circumstances surrounding the boy's return home? His attitudes, actions, and the father's response. Well, he hit rock bottom. He absolutely hit rock bottom. And the text does say that he came to himself. He had a shift in his way of viewing things and thinking about things. His circumstances, they weren't changed. I mean, they had changed over time, but when he came to himself, it wasn't that his circumstances all of a sudden changed, but he, in that circumstance, began to look at things entirely differently than he had looked at them before. And sometimes that's our greatest need, is to think about things differently than we've thought about them before. And what we see out of this boy is repentance and confession of fault, of humility and accountability. He recognized he was where he was at, suffering the way he was suffering because of his own choices, and it didn't have to be that way. He remembered what it was like even for the lowest of servants in his father's house. They had plenty to eat. He didn't even have enough to eat. And he knew he would be much better off back with his father, that what he had left behind he desired greatly now. And so he arose and he went back. That's a literal picture of repentance. It's an about face. It is a change of mind. It's a change of heart followed by changed actions. And that's what this boy is doing. And he is coming and he fully admits his fault and his wrong. Sometimes that's not the response people give to a realization of the bad condition they are in. They begin to find other people to blame. Well, if so-and-so hadn't done this or that, or if these kinds of things hadn't happened, then I wouldn't be in the mess that I am. He took ownership of the problem. I did wrong. I don't deserve anything, but I'm going to return to my father and ask if I could just be a servant. I don't even want to be considered a son, just be a servant. But then it says that as he returned, the father saw him while he was still far off, which indicates to us that the father had been looking for him. The father hadn't just forgot about him. The father hadn't written him off. The father hadn't just said, oh, well, so be it. The father was watching for his boy, and he was able to identify him while he was still a long way off as he was walking home. And the immediate response of the father was compassion. It wasn't anger. It wasn't, oh brother, look who's coming. Sure enough, when he runs out all of us, he's going to come crawling back begging. It wasn't anything like that. It was compassion and love for his boy. And he ran to him. Here's another one of those social, cultural nuances that we might not pick up on, but it was not a dignified thing for a Jewish man to run. He was always calm and composed, but man, this father was so overjoyed that he threw that all to the wind and he ran to his boy and he embraced him and he kissed him. And the son was able to get out of his mouth what he wanted to say. Father, I have sinned against you. But that's as far as he got. Well, no, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer to be called your son. That's as far as he got. He didn't get to the point of saying, just, I'll be one of your hired servants. Because immediately, and the father didn't even respond to that, immediately the father turns to his servants and says, get the best robe we've got, get the ring, put the robe on him, the ring on his finger, the shoes on his feet. Go get the fatted calf and kill it. Let's celebrate. My son who was dead is now alive. He was lost, but now he's found. And they immediately went into celebration mode, expression of joy. Question number 5, who did not rejoice? Well, that of course was the older brother. He did not rejoice. His response was one of anger. He was angry at what was playing out. The father rejoiced at his son's return. The brother was angry at his younger brother, but he's also angry at how his father responded to his younger brother's return. And the father went to him. He had no doubt looked around and said, well, where's your brother? I mean, we're rejoicing. Our family's back together again. So he goes out and he entreats his son to come in, but the son refuses to do so. This older brother, he was focused on what he didn't have or didn't get. He didn't get a celebration. His father didn't kill the fatted calf for him. Instead of what he did have, the father said, son, everything I have is yours. What's mine is yours. But that wasn't enough for this older brother. I've been faithful to you. I have served you and been faithful to you all of my life. I have never disobeyed you, and yet you have never rejoiced over that the way you're rejoicing over your own son who has been so disrespectful and foolish and sinful and all of those kinds of things. And you throw a party for him. I think it's not difficult to see the kind of attitude and thinking that's going on here. He is jealous. He is comparing himself to his younger brother. I am more deserving of being treated well by my father than is my younger brother. He's being judgmental against his brother. I'm better than him. Look at how I've conducted my life. Look at how he's conducted his life. He's also very self-centered. We talked about the selfishness of the younger brother. Well, this older brother is very self-centered as well because he made it all about himself. And obviously, the older brother is a depiction of those at the very outset of the chapter, the Pharisees and the scribes, who were critical of Jesus for his receiving and eating with sinners, just as the older brother was critical of how his father responded to his sinful younger brother coming home. It's been said, and I think I would have to agree with it, that the parable of the prodigal son really isn't about the son at all. It's a parable about God. And I think that's an accurate thing to say, because the attitude that Jesus witnessed in these scribes and Pharisees was not reflective of the attitude of God towards sinners who repent. And he wanted them to see that. He wanted them to see how God really did look at people, even people who had lived terrible lives, sinful lives. That those people were lost and God wants them found. He wants them to be sought out. He wants them to be brought back. He wants them to be restored, not to a lesser place, but to their former place in a right relationship with Him. So the last question on that sheet is, what do we learn about God from the third parable? Well, number one, God's attention and concern is for those who are lost. Just as the shepherd left the 99 to go seek the one, there is a priority given to the lost. And that priority is in the mind of God, and it needs to be reflected by His own people, that our concern is for those who are lost. And that has a priority place in our thinking and our attention. Another thing we learn is that God so much respects our free will, our ability to make choices and act upon those choices, that He allows us to make the choice to leave Him. It breaks His heart. It's not that He isn't capable of stopping us, but He doesn't. He allows us to make choices and to act on those choices, even when those choices are very self-destructive ones. And that's our God. He will let us do that because He doesn't want from us a response or an allegiance that is forced, but He wants a response from us that is out of our own love in coming back to Him. He will not, this is the third thing we learn about God, He will not force or coerce the lost to return. The father was watchful. He was looking for his boy to come back home, but he didn't force him to do it. He allowed him to do it. And when he did it, that door was wide open for that boy to walk through to come home. Well, actually, the father runs out the door and he embraces his boy. And he kisses him. And he restores him to his position. Not as a servant, as the boy had asked for, but to his place as his son, to his rightful place in the family. Well, I don't know if you could say rightful place, because that's another thing here. God's treatment of us is not based upon what we deserve. That this younger boy, he didn't deserve this kind of treatment because of the way he had treated his father. His father didn't respond to him in kind. The older brother was wanting treatment based on what he deserved. He felt like he deserved more than his younger brother did, because look how faithful I've been to you, how I've never disobeyed you, I've served you always. You should be treating me better. But the truth of the matter is that all of us are in need of what God showed to the younger son, compassion. When he saw him, he had compassion. And when God sees us, he has compassion on us. And what you and I need to see that we need from God is his compassion and mercy. Not that we have earned through our constant serving and never disobeying him, that somehow earns for us the Father's favor. That's not how it works. So this very powerful parable in this set of three parables, prompted by Jesus being criticized by scribes and Pharisees, the ones who are supposed to have it all together religiously and spiritually, being critical of Jesus because he associated with sinners. That there is a failing there on their part that has to be closely guarded against. We want to be faithful to God. We want to serve him faithfully. But we also have to know where the heart of God is, and that we're willing and ready to rejoice with God in the things that he rejoices over. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Let's rejoice with God. Well, we will continue our study at our next session, which we'll post that video this coming Wednesday. But I want you to go ahead and read from chapter 16, Luke 16, verses 1 through 31. And we'll look forward to being together for our study then as well. Thank you.